On the 16th of July 2020, a canary yellow coloured transit van pulled out of a traveller halting site in Cambridgeshire in England. This rather jazzy-looking vehicle only got as far as a few hundred metres down the road before it was stopped by armed officers. There was just one man in the front of the van with dark greasy hair and wearing a zipped-up navy jacket. Officers observed him trying to damage a mobile phone he was clutching in his hands as they approached the driver's door. Wearing body cameras that were filming the entire interaction, the officers made their way to the side door and pulled it open. Inside, they found one man, clearly terrified and disorientated, lying on a mattress with 2 pillows and a duvet. When quizzed about his passenger in the back of the van, the driver insisted to the police that it was his mate. The police officers knew better. The passenger was actually one of 2 brothers who had been kidnapped just over a week earlier at a flat in Highbury Hill. They'd gone there to pay off a debt they owed to Warren Crossan, the Belfast-based drug dealer who'd been shot dead just a few weeks earlier outside his mother's house. Crossan might have died, but the debts owed to him were still very much alive. The brothers were rung by a man from a number they didn't know and told to go to a flat near the Arsenal football stadium. When they got there, they were greeted by several men, including the driver of the transit van, who had a handgun tucked into the waistband of his tracksuit bottoms. They were informed the debt had been increased to £330,000. They must have at first thought it was some kind of a sick joke. How could the debt have jumped up by that much? But seconds later, they were left in no doubt at the seriousness of their situation. Another group of men stormed into the apartment, all of them brandishing knives and bladed weapons. The brothers' mobile phones and wallets were taken, and they were pushed to the floor. Their hands were bound by tape and they were blindfolded before being led out of the flat into a waiting vehicle. They must have been terrified. Over the next week, they were moved about until they ended up at the halting site. They were fed sleeping tablets, stripped naked, made to wash with Dettol spray to mask the forensics, and they were given old and dirty clothes to wear. A bucket was provided for their basic needs. A subsequent court case heard how they were consistently threatened by the men, who demanded they pay up the £330,000. They were shown a machete and told how their fingers were going to be sliced off, one by one, until the money came through. The brothers repeatedly insisted they had no way of paying such a vast sum, and on the 13th of July, one of them was released in the hope he would be able to get some cash for his brother's release. At this stage, however, the police had been alerted to what was going on, and a couple of days later, they stopped that bright yellow transit van. The greasy-haired driver gave his name as Darren McLean. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Double Cross, the Murder of Robbie Lawler, a Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal. Niall, do you remember the confusion that there was after this criminal called Darren McLean was arrested in England?
I do, actually, because when he was first arrested, we were told Ger Dundon has been arrested, and it was stated as fact. And obviously then they appeared in court. It was in the UK. I don't think any Irish reporters were over there for the initial hearing. And a guy called Darren McLean appeared, and no Ger Dundon. So there was this great confusion because obviously Ger Dundon, one of the most notorious people, and then there was this feeling, oh God, did we get it wrong?
Did you Google Darren McLean and found nothing?
Totally,
one of those situations?
Totally, yeah. And there was totally this feeling, oh no, somebody has mixed it up in whatever way it came back. And he was just reported as being Darren McLean for a period of time until somebody actually got to the bottom of it.
Yeah, that it was Ger Dundon. So the bottom of it, of course, was that he changed his name by deed poll in 2018. So, why would he have done that?
Well, I think the name Dundon is quite an unusual surname, actually. And there's just no doubt in Ireland it's one of the most notorious surnames because of the actions of Ger and his brothers. It's not a very common name. We have seen this before. People, members of the Hutch family and other members even of related to the Kinahans have changed their name by deed poll before. It's not unheard of. But yeah, Ger Dundon obviously wanted to escape some of that notoriety. I suppose the value of a deed poll name is for every official document. If you're applying for social welfare, a home, anything like that, he would go down as Darren McLean. That's just the way it is.
Yeah. And of course, the name Dundon is so linked to double crossing. Like, they were notorious for double crossing. And when it came to Robbie Lawler, it is, or it maybe isn't, the betrayal, the big betrayal. Like, did they betray Robbie Lawler, or did they go on to collect the cash and betray Owen Maguire? One way or another, somebody was double crossed. I think I always feel that the secrets really of what happened in the Lawler murder is held within those EncroChat messages. But let's take those two scenarios. Either A, they double crossed Robbie Lawler, or B, they made hay the next few days and collected some money.
Yeah, I mean, the Dundon brothers, John and Wayne in particular, I mean, obviously Desi Dundon has been in prison for a long time, but Wayne and John earned this reputation as being very manipulative people. I know that certainly they had a lot of younger people working around them, unlike some of the criminals in Dublin who are getting well paid for the criminality they get involved in. Ger and Wayne used to use a mix of flattery and intimidation and just had that reputation of being very manipulative and kind of managing to put pressure. So it's probably not surprising that they would look at this as an opportunity to earn money. As well, you have to remember that they have spent the last long number of years in prison. An opportunity to make a huge amount of money is very, very important. They have certainly managed to generate revenue behind bars, in prison, involved in the drugs trade, in jail. But if you're talking about 20, 30, 40,000, that's a huge amount of money for these guys.
While Ger Dundon may have changed his name, it was clear he couldn't change his nature. And after being let out on bail in March 2021, after being charged with the kidnapping of the two brothers, he stayed in the UK, where he continued his life of crime. In May 2022, he was arrested after trying to steal a moped and then physically attacking the owner who tried to stop him. In the meantime, the investigation into Robbie Lawler's murder in Belfast continued. In late December 2020, at a bail hearing in Belfast's Magistrates Court, we first learned how more than 20 suspects had been identified as part of the investigation into the Dublin gangster's death. The court was also told that international drug dealers were also believed to have been involved in planning Lawler's assassination, and credible threats were made against anyone thinking about helping with the police probe. Despite the long list of suspects, only two men had been charged: Patrick Tier from Thornbury Hill and Adrian Holland from Ardoyne, both in Belfast. Neither man was suspected of being the gunman. Instead, they were charged with the murder as part of a joint enterprise with unidentified others. A detective inspector went through the details of the case they had pieced together so far, how they believed Lawler was shot dead after travelling to a pre-arranged meeting at a house in Ardoyne owned by Adrian Holland's family. When he got there, a gunman came out the front door, opened fire and shot Lawler several times. He died at the scene. The gunman then fled down several side streets to where a stolen Volkswagen Sirocco was supposed to be waiting for him to use as a getaway car, but it had been set on fire. Instead, an Audi vehicle, which was later found also burnt out in the Crumlin area of the city, was believed to have been used in the gunman's escape. The court heard how Patrick Tier was allegedly instrumental in moving the getaway cars for the man who shot Lawler into the Ardoyne area on the 31st of March. Mobile phone evidence also showed that Tier had been tracking Robbie Lawler and his movements in the days before he was shot. The case against Mr. Tier is that he was specifically involved in research, logistics, disposal and the interference with the course of justice, a police detective explained to the court. Adrian Holland, and another suspect, described as an international drug dealer, were said to have met at the Sligo Park Hotel in March, and that this trip was organised and paid for by Tyr. After the murder, the police further alleged Tyr met up with Holland to arrange their story and to organise a forensic clean-up. Throughout the course of this period, in terms of planning, preparation and execution of the murder, Patrick Tyr is in contact not only with Adrian Holland, but also some international drug dealers and members of a very significant organised crime gang. The detective continued. Ultimately, it's our view that Mr. Tyr has been instrumental in this murder, and without his involvement, it couldn't have happened. Tyr's defence barrister, however, said the entire case against Tyr boiled down to his association with Adrian Holland, a man who grew up in a neighbouring street. When you consider his own circumstances, particularly the fact that he's driving his own car, bringing Mr. Holland places and allowing his phone to be used, it's actually absurd to suggest he knowingly had anything to do with this, the lawyer said. His bail was denied. Indeed, both Tyr and Holland were remanded in custody for some time and now face further counts of conspiracy to murder and possessing a 9mm self-loading pistol with intent to endanger life. But we'll get back to that later. We need to now revisit one of Ireland's most heinous murders, the one that most likely triggered Robbie Lawler's own assassination, the straw that finally broke that camel's back and saw him finally stopped for good. In mid-May 2021, Paul Crosby and Gerard Cruz, both of Rathmullen Park and Drogheda, were arrested and charged with the murder of 17-year-old Keane Mulready-Woods. By the end of the month, it was ruled their cases would be heard in the non-jury Special Criminal Court. In certain cases, the Director of Public Prosecutions can certify that, in their opinion, the ordinary courts are inadequate to secure the effective administration of justice. In other words, there's a possible fear of jury tampering or intimidation. The Special Criminal Court also heard that Crosby had 40 previous convictions. Indeed, just 25 years old at the time of Keane Mulready-Woods' murder, Crosby had quite the rap sheet. His convictions included road traffic offences, possession of drugs, criminal damage, theft and fraud. Oh, and arson. While serving time in prison, he was convicted of being in possession of a mobile phone. Crosby was also previously acquitted of attempted murder in February 2019. He was accused of trying to kill Gerard Boyle at Bow Park in Slane on November the 10th, 2016. Mr. Boyle had been stabbed 28 times and forced into the boot of a car, which was then pushed into a canal. He'd escaped from the car and swam to the canal bank, where a passing taxi driver called the emergency services. Crosby denied any involvement, and a Central Criminal Court jury took just 43 minutes to find him not guilty. In early December 2022, Crosby pleaded guilty at the Special Criminal Court to the lesser charge of facilitating Keane Mulready-Woods' murder. Gerard Cruz's lawyers told the court that day that their client would be doing the same. Last February, Crosby was sentenced to 10 years in jail, while Gerard Cruz, who was considered by the court to be at a lower level than Crosby, received a sentence of 7.5 years. Mr. Justice Tony Hunt told the court how the circumstances around the teenager's murder had fed into the gravity of the offences committed by both men. It's painful and unnatural to lose a child prematurely, he said. But it is particularly so when it comes about as a result of the crime of murder. In this case, the remains of the child were treated in a disgraceful and inhumane way that beggars belief. The judge also detailed how the chief suspect for the murder was Robbie Lawler, a criminal of significant notoriety and linked to several murders, who was heavily involved in a feud between rival criminal gangs in Drogheda. Such gangs, the judge said, are the scourge of the localities concerned and are a matter of nationwide concern. One other man was arrested, charged and jailed for his part in the gruesome killing. In November 2021, Gerard Jed McKenna pleaded guilty to cleaning up and removing evidence from his home in Rathmullen Park, the house where Keane Mulready-Woods was murdered. The court heard that it was not suggested that the dad of 8 had been there when the youngster was killed or present during the shocking dismemberment of the boy. Indeed, the judge said, McKenna only became aware that something had occurred when he walked into the house and was instructed to clean the property. He also said that while McKenna had expressed shame about his involvement and had known the youngster since he was born, he still surrendered his home to an organised crime gang. Turning a blind eye and assisting criminal gangs is the essential bedrock of their success, and this kind of assistance must be discouraged, the judge said. The court heard that the person who ordered McKenna to surrender his house was a person of very significant notoriety, with a number of murders attributed to him. And that this person, who we now know was Robbie Lawler, was not easy to say no to, and when they tell you to do something, you do it. McKenna was jailed for 4 years.
Paul Crosby was somebody who had grown up as in criminal terms with the Maguire faction and had acted as a runner for them, but had, by all accounts, developed a real hatred for some of the senior figures in the Maguire gang, and had been, I suppose, the right-hand man really to two of the brothers who really led that faction in that bloody war in Drogheda. Gerard Jed McKenna would have been a total other type, the opposite to Crosby, somebody who had not been ever regarded as a serious organised criminal, somebody who would have suffered from addiction issues and would have seen as being the type of people that people like Crosby and Robbie Lawler would have preyed on. Somebody that was quite sort of vulnerable and subject to pressure. Gerard Cruz would have been involved in criminality through his life, but would not have been regarded as somebody who was up the upper echelons of an organised crime gang. But nonetheless, he was 49 years old when he did plead guilty to a charge in relation to the murder of Keane Mulready-Woods, and that charge did include facilitating an organised crime gang in participating in the activities leading to a serious offence, which is obviously the murder of Keane Mulready-Woods.
And we did, through their court cases, get a very distressing and full picture of what had happened to Keane Mulready-Woods. Like, it was very difficult for his family to listen to.
The term butchered, I suppose, is not inaccurate in this case. It is almost inconceivable what that child was put through. For the family to have to hear it, of course, must be, we can only imagine how they feel. But he was literally tortured and then chopped up. And then his body parts and his remains were used to make a statement to Robbie Lawler's criminal rivals, effectively, a desecration of a human being's body, and not just a human being, but a young child, effectively.
And everyone was in agreement, of course, that Robbie Lawler was responsible for this murder. He was dead, but he was named in court.
Yes.
By Justice Tony Hunt.
Yeah, I mean, details were given in court about Robbie Lawler being caught on CCTV from a distance in the home. The fact he was there is beyond dispute. But, we also heard during the court how Robbie Lawler was the main instigator of what happened. While he might have been helped by Paul Crosby, Robbie Lawler was the mastermind of this. And, it is still a shocking and gruesome murder that really we haven't seen the like of in Ireland before. And it did literally become headline news across the globe because these things are just not normal. And Robbie Lawler was the person who brought this about to make some sort of sick point, really.
And it also became the moment that the tide turned on that Drogheda feud. The crackdown came, the politicians arrived, and really it was also the moment that Robbie Lawler signed his own death warrant.
For a child to be literally butchered in a gangland killing in this way, it simply cannot be tolerated in a normal society. There's lots of criminality occurs that people will I suppose, tolerate or look the other way from. But something like this is of such a level that there was a general understanding, not just from the politicians, but also from the community itself, that you can't have this thing going on and that something must be done. Robbie Lawler and his associates did seal their own fate by this action, in that not only was it because they were a relatively small, contained gang operating in a particular geographical area, once the resources of the state were focused in on them, there was always going to be one result. But also, Robbie Lawler's murder became something that, well, we believe that a large number of criminal figures more or less joined together to agree that this couldn't go on and that he must be dealt with. And that's likely what happened, in that, if somebody is out there and is capable of this level of violence, the other criminals know that something has to be done about him as well.
Back over in the UK, police were still trying to get a trial date for the kidnapping of the two brothers who owed Warren Crossan money. But in December 2021 at London's Wood Green Crown Court, the case was adjourned after the judge was informed that one of the defendants, Cornelius Price, was in a coma and doctors were unsure about when he might wake up. It was a shocking diagnosis and nothing to do with his life of crime, just one of those cards that life can deal you sometimes. Price was struck down with limbic encephalitis. It's when the limbic areas of the brain are swollen and so they stop working properly. It affects memory, learning and emotions such as aggression. It also leaves you susceptible to seizures. Gravely ill in a Welsh hospital, Price was due to stand trial with 5 alleged associates: Danny Bridges, Mark Kavanagh, Darren McLean, who we now know as Ger Dundon, Quincy Jaron Bramble and Lisa Marie Finnerty. But as his lawyer told the court, he has been in the hospital for quite some time now. He is still ventilated at the moment. In terms of his ongoing treatment and diagnosis, the consultant said that it is difficult to estimate when Price is likely to wake from his coma. It could be months, or worst case scenario, it could be years. In the end, he hung on until February of last year.
Cornelius Price's funeral was a spectacle, I suppose. You could see there was a number of Lamborghinis, a number of other high-powered sports cars, gave him a guard of honour as it was brought to the cemetery. We had floral tributes, thousands of euros worth of floral tributes placed on his grave. They included a floral tribute in the shape of a Captain Morgan's bottle, which of course he had been seen drinking after Robbie Lawler was dead, and in a video put on social media. We also had flowers in the shape of a gun, and we even had a mocked up copy of the Sunday World placed on the grave, saying Cornelius Price gets the best bed in heaven. That was a first. That was a first. That was a first. So he got a kind of a hero's send off.
The Gardaí were kind of anxious that it might happen in Ireland, because I think the family wanted it to happen in Ireland.
Well, there was a bit of sort of disinformation put out in that social media pictures went up of a group of people appearing to wait for Cornelius' body to land in Ireland, holding up signs and welcoming him home. But it wasn't to be the case, whether it was trying to put rivals off track or guards or the media, it's not clear. But he was buried in England and there was a huge amount of people attending. And again, a massive, massive expense. Back in the past, we used to sometimes take pictures of photos from a distance, but this was all played out live on social media, on TikTok and on Facebook.
So what about Cornelius Price and his legacy? There were rumours, of course, that he paid 100,000 for Lawler's murder. He was perfectly capable of that, wasn't he?
Yeah, Cornelius Price was, by all accounts, a bully, a dangerous person, somebody who preyed on vulnerable addicts primarily. These were primarily the people he had working for him. He was a man who had been linked to acts of extreme violence himself, including the murder of a pregnant woman and her boyfriend, certainly regarded by Gardaí as one of the most dangerous criminal figures operating in the country at the time. His legacy, I suppose, is a legacy of fear, of using violence to collect money, of spreading drug dealing across parts of Ireland where it probably never had been so entrenched. He was a violent, dangerous man. Of course, he also got a hero send-off, as we saw at his funeral. But Cornelius Price, he left a legacy of terror, really. A very, very dangerous person.
So Lawler blamed Price and really Owen Maguire for Richie Carberry's death. And I think they feared that Lawler would get to them first if they didn't kill him.
I think they will have known that Robbie Lawler was getting further and further out of control. I think we can presume that some of the social media taunting had really gotten to Robbie Lawler. We know, because of the actions in his role in the murder of Keane Mulready-Woods, that he was willing to use a level of violence that had been unheard of before. Robbie Lawler was also willing to commit murder, even if there was a good risk of him being caught. And it really, I think, came down to let's get him before he gets us. And that's why it's believed that there was huge resources, money and collaboration put in together to hunting down Lawler and making sure that he didn't live another day.
It's hard to know if Price had lived, if he ever could have been linked to the hit on Robbie Lawler. There are few, if any, who would have been willing to rat on him. Not only out of fear of retaliation, but because, well, quite simply, Robbie Lawler was not a popular man. But there are currently 3 men before the courts facing charges for their involvement in his death. Last June, the third man, James Fields, appeared in court for assisting offenders in the murder. The question is, how likely is it they'll be found guilty? And why, almost 5 years on, in an investigation that initially identified over 20 possible suspects, are there just 3 of them in the dock? You've been listening to Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler. This podcast is produced by Nicola Tallant and Ian Malini for Crime World Presents. Claude Amini and Alison Morris are assistant producers. The script is by Jane Finnegan. Graphics are by Enda Bulger. This podcast is based on the book Web of Betrayal by me, Nicola Tallant. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.